Hello, everyone. We've recently received the news that Elizabeth II has passed away at 96, and it is likely that her son is going to become King Charles III, which probably makes you wonder, who were the other King Charles? Well, join me, Dr. Northrup, today and find out more about these Stuart kings and their contribution to English history. So, today is a tale of three kings, Charles I, Charles II, and Charles III. Now, you might be familiar with the Tudors, and the Tudors are very popular because of hit musical Six, or maybe you watched a TV show about them or read books. Now, they're going to be gone now. Of course, there's Henry VII, Henry VIII with the six wives, and then he has several children who rule, the last of who is Elizabeth I. Now, she is going to die. She doesn't have any children, so the crown then goes to her cousins, the Stuarts, and that's going to be James I here. You see James VI and James I. James VI of Scotland, James I of England. He's our first Stuart king. He is the father of Charles I. Now, let's just talk a little bit about England. England is unique in European history. Why? It has a great geographical position. It is an island, meaning it's kind of hard to invade an island. Like, think about the Spanish Armada. It's just not easy. It has an interesting blend of different cultures as well. And it's a unique government in Europe. Why? Because they are a constitutional monarchy. Now, way back, they signed the Magna Carta, and people started developing these ideas then about the idea that monarchs have limitations and that they have to share power with Parliament. And this is going to evolve into an elected body called the House of Commons, and then they have the House of Lords. And now some kings will have more power, some will have less. It is this idea, though, that the sovereignty lies with the king in Parliament. This means that the monarch has power, but it derives from Parliament. And this is going to be something that's kind of in flux throughout this period here. Now, James I is going to become King of England. Who is he? He is going to be someone who maybe wasn't the best option, and yet there he was. He believed in divine rights. What does that mean? It means that God had favored him, this guy here, to become king. He had kind of these short, spindly legs, which we don't really see so much here in this fabulous portrait of him. And he often wore this kind of quilted doublet because he was afraid of assassinations all the time. His tongue was really large in his mouth. He stuttered. He drank awkwardly. He kind of like struck a poor figure, but he was very, very, very intelligent. He had some defects, though, in his character, which became more pronounced the older he got. He exhausted the treasury by giving away gifts to his favorites. And these favorites sometimes were a little questionable as well. He also gave really long speeches in Parliament, which were pretty exhausting for people to listen to, which I'm sure you're familiar with that idea yourself. Now, this is the same King James that's going to have the whole gunpowder plot, where they were going to blow up the House of Lords and House of Commons in 1505. It didn't end up working, but, you know, this is during his rule. Now, he's married. There's another portrait of him there. Wow, what an interesting guy. He's married to Anne of Denmark. That's his wife, Anne. Anne of Denmark loved extravagant clothes and jewels. I mean, look at her. She looks great in them. Why not? They have two sons and one daughter. Now, he loves Anne, sure, but he, like I said, he dotes on his favorites. He liked to kiss them in public, and according to one sir, in so lascivious a mode in public, promoted many to imagine some things done in a retiring house that exceed my expressions. Now, in 1625, he dies. Now, who should have been king next? His first son, Prince Henry Stuart, but he dies. So then it goes to Charles I. Okay, here's our first Charles. Who is he? Now, he is the son. He was not supposed to become king, though. Remember, he has an older brother who was like into hunting and dashing and all the things that you would think of me like a good king. Well, instead, you get Charles. Now, remember, there's the heir and the spare. He's the spare. Here he is, King Charles I. Stuart, we're still in the Stuart family. He had a Scot accent, so like a Scottish accent. He had a kind of a falsetto voice and a stammer. And so you might not know about all this if you just saw his portraits. Anthony Van Dyck creates these fabulous portraits of him that show him as a really strong absolutist monarch that's going to be really, like outdoorsy and all that kind of stuff, which you might be familiar with these. Like, I mean, look at that equestrian portrait, right? Would you imagine that he might not be like the most dashing of princes and kings? Anyways, he's kind of small, he's nervous, he's shy, he has very good manners though, a lot of dignity. He was a very dutiful husband to his wife, Queen Henrietta Maria. Now, she is from France, she's a French princess, and he's a really dutiful husband. He doesn't have any mistresses and stuff, so, I mean, that we know of. And like, there he goes. Now, not the greatest king, but he collects a lot of art and those kind of things. Him and his wife loved masks, loved to do this. Now, under his rule, we are going to have an expansion of colonies, which already started, of course, under his father, but it's going to keep going. So if you are in like a U.S., here's all his kids. In the U.S. history course, you might be familiar with, of course, Jamestown, which is named after his father, the Pilgrims, Puritans. All this is expanding, though, under Charles's rule. So kind of just to piece these puzzles here together. Anyways, well, this is the difference between all the religions here. If this is something you're interested in, definitely go look at it. It's a lot. Though, I do have a point for this, though. So there's a growth that's happening in the Church of England that's going to happen already, but it's definitely going to be growing under Charles. And this is the Puritans. And Puritans, you might think of them as like fun haters and stuff like that. Some of them have already gone, which we just saw. They already went over to Massachusetts. There's some, though, that stay in England, and they aren't too happy with Charles at all. They aren't too happy with Charles. And in the end, they put together an army led by a charismatic leader named Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell was a member of the House of Commons, and as he gained power, he's going to begin attacking the crown in Parliament. So the king tried to assert authority. This is Charles I still tried to assert authority over Oliver Cromwell, and he wanted to kind of rule by divine right. Again, he's married to this French woman who is allowed to have mass. Oh dear, as a Catholic, my goodness. Anyways, the point is, Parliament is not having any of that, and Cromwell is going to lead an armed revolt, and in 1649 conquers the country, and this is called the English Civil War. So this is against the Roundheads and Cavaliers, and the point is, it does not go well for Charles I. So much so that he's actually beheaded in 1649. Yikes. And this is going to begin the period called the Interregnum. So between kings, interregnum. This is when Oliver Cromwell will be ruling England. There's actually some expansion of colonial things as well, but that's a different story for a different day. Now, when you hear the word Puritan, like I said, you might think of people who just hate having fun, right? And this is kind of where we get the sense of this word coming from this era here, basically fun hating. But fortunately for everyone who loved beer, Cromwell's rule only lasted 10 years. He died in 1659, leaving his son Dick then to rule. But Dick was not made of the same stuff as Oliver. And so he's going to kind of hightail it out, and we get then Charles II. Oh, sad day that Charles I was executed. We already knew that though. So this is called the Restoration. And this is Charles II. And in 1660, he comes back to the throne. Now, he'd been kicking it in France with his cousin Louis, having the time of his life in Versailles. I mean, sad that your dad gets beheaded and stuff, but I don't think he was mourning the entire time in Versailles. Now, his cousin Louis XIV definitely wants Charles II back on the throne here because it's good to have an ally there as well. So he is going to say how about, Charles, you try to be an absolutist ruler? And Charles is always sure, I'll definitely do that. But it's not really going to work, right? Now, unlike France, England does not have absolute monarchs. This is, again, Parliament is still around here. And so basically, in putting Charles on the throne, Parliament's saying we have more power than the king. Now, Charles does get back some of the power, some of the crown's power, especially in regards to things like taxation. He was able to levy some national taxes, kind of like what Colbert was doing in France, but it is not going to be anything like what we see in France. Now, we often call this the Restoration period. If you're into literature and stuff, you might know this term. He's encouraging arts. He's encouraging free living. He had mistresses since he was 18. He had something like 14 natural children. He had a lovely wife, Catherine of Braganza. But for whatever reason, he also loved his mistresses. And this is going to be called the Age of the Libertine under Charles II, and it's famous for immorality. Now, the most important writer of this time, one of them, is the Earl of Rochester, who actually made up a poem to make fun of Charles, like on the spot. And it said, "Restless he rolls from whore to whore, a merry monarch, scandalous and poor." So we often hear him called the Merry Monarch because of this. He kept a lot of mistresses, like I said, and apparently on his deathbed, his line is going to say, "Don't let poor Nellie starve." This is because of Nell Gwyn, another mistress of his. Ooh, Restoration England, so much fun. The theaters are opening again. Women are going to be on stage. It is just kind of a raucous, fun time in England. And there's poor Nell. Don't let Nellie starve. Now, he dies without any legitimate children. So the throne actually goes to his brother, James II, and then it will eventually be passed on. James II, who we see here, and then it'll be passed on to James's children with this whole glorious revolution. Again, another story for another day. Our story is about Charles's. So this is going to get passed on then first to Charles II's brother, and then his niece and nephew, first cousins who are married. Yikes. And then they don't have any children, thank goodness. And that will then get passed on, because that's William's parent anyways. So then that'll get passed on to Mary's sister Anne, and she's the last Stuart monarch. So that's kind of the end of the story of the Charleses here. I hope we kind of made some sense. But as you see, this is our family tree. This is the family tree. So this is the houses of Stuart. As you see, there was James the First of England with Anne, all these kids, who ends up then, there's Charles, has his head chopped off. There's Charles II, no children, James II, and his two daughters who rule along with his nephew. And that's the end of the Stuarts there. So it's going to actually go back on up to James's daughter's side, and that's where we're going to get the Hanovers. So then we have all the Hanovers here with all the Georges, just Georges for days, right? And in the end, Victoria, and then we have our Windsor line that we still see here today. So the question is, I guess, that we are going to ask ourselves is, will there be a Charles III? We've had Charles I, an unfortunate ending, right? With, the whole having your head chopped off. Charles II, Merry Monarch. What will Charles III be? Who knows? Or will he even be Charles III? Fun times, and I am here to find out. All right, I hope you learned a tiny bit today. I know we kind of blasted through history, but hopefully you learned some more, and I am so excited to see what will happen. Have a great day.